Have you ever wondered if John Wilkes Booth acted alone in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln? The answer to this query takes us down a rabbit hole of intrigue and conspiracy, far beyond the single act of Booth pulling the trigger. John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln, is a notorious figure in American history. But the story doesn't end with him. Booth was not the sole architect of this plot, but rather a piece in a larger, more sinister puzzle. This conspiracy was not the brainchild of one man, but of several co-conspirators, all unified by the same dark purpose. Their plan was not only to assassinate Lincoln, but also Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward. The magnitude of their ambition is chilling, a plot that aimed to decapitate the leadership of the United States government in one fell swoop. This was not a random act of violence, but a meticulously planned and coordinated endeavor. The co-conspirators in this plot were not mere footnotes in history, but active participants in the planning and execution of this devastating event. They worked in the shadows, their actions hidden from the public eye, but their impact was felt across the nation. Their names are less known, but their deeds changed the course of American history. Booth may have been the one to pull the trigger, but he was not alone. He was part of a larger conspiracy, a collective of individuals united by a shared purpose, a common goal. They planned, they plotted, they conspired, and in the end, their actions led to the death of one of America's greatest leaders. So, Booth was not a lone wolf, but part of a larger, more sinister plot. A plot that aimed to change the course of history, to shift the balance of power, to plunge the nation into chaos. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was not the act of a single man, but the culmination of a grand conspiracy. Did you know that Lincoln's assassination was not the original plan? It's true. The initial scheme was not to murder the beloved president, but rather to kidnap him. This audacious plot was hatched by none other than John Wilkes Booth and his co-conspirators. The goal of this daring plan was to abduct President Lincoln and use him as a bargaining chip to negotiate the release of Confederate prisoners of war. This was a desperate attempt to turn the tide of the Civil War, which was heavily favoring the Union by early 1865. Booth, an accomplished actor and a fervent supporter of the Confederacy, was the mastermind behind the plot. He believed that by kidnapping Lincoln, he could force the Union to release thousands of Confederate soldiers. In his mind, this would not only reinvigorate the Confederate forces but also demoralize the Union Army, potentially changing the course of the war. The kidnapping plot was meticulously planned. The conspirators intended to seize Lincoln while he was attending a performance at a hospital located on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. The plan was to abduct him during his carriage ride home. However, fate intervened. On the night of the planned abduction, Lincoln changed his plans and did not attend the performance. The kidnapping plot had failed. This unexpected turn of events left Booth and his co-conspirators in a state of shock and disappointment. But Booth was not one to give up easily. He was determined to make a dramatic statement, one that would shake the very foundations of the Union. And so, the plot shifted from abduction to assassination. Booth decided that if he could not kidnap Lincoln, he would kill him. Fate, it seems, had a different plan for Lincoln. The failed kidnapping plot led to one of the most tragic events in American history, the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. This twist of fate forever changed the course of the nation, leaving an indelible mark on its history. Booth and his co-conspirators were not just plotting in the shadows. They were also watching and waiting, meticulously studying their target, President Abraham Lincoln. For the days leading up to that fateful night at Ford's Theater, Lincoln was under constant surveillance. Booth was a familiar face in the theater, and he took full advantage of that, using his unrestricted access to observe the president's movements and routines. This was not a hastily planned operation. It was a cold, calculated scheme, born out of desperation and a twisted sense of duty to a lost cause. The co-conspirators were like shadows, always lurking but rarely seen. They watched Lincoln's daily routines, the routes he took, the people he met, and the times he was most vulnerable. They were patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, a moment when the president would be most exposed and the chances of success would be highest. They gathered every bit of information they could. Knowledge was their weapon, and they wielded it with a deadly intent. Booth, in particular, was known for his charm and charisma, traits he used to gather intelligence without arousing suspicion. He was an actor, after all, and this was his most sinister performance yet. To Booth and his co-conspirators, Lincoln was more than just the president. He was the embodiment of a union they despised, a symbol of change they were unwilling to accept. In their warped minds, his assassination would be a blow to the Union and a victory for their cause. This was the chilling reality of the days leading up to Lincoln's assassination. A group of men driven by misguided beliefs were watching every move of the president, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were planning, preparing, and plotting, all while hiding in plain sight. And so, with every piece of information gathered, every routine memorized, and every detail scrutinized, the stage was set for one of the most tragic events in American history. The first doctor to reach Lincoln after he was shot made a curious observation. Enter Dr. Charles Leal, a young army surgeon attending the play at Ford's Theater that fateful night. When the shot rang out, Leal rushed to the president's box and was the first to examine Lincoln. His quick thinking and medical expertise allowed him to make a critical observation that would later fuel intriguing theories about Lincoln's health. Leal found Lincoln unconscious, his breathing labored, and his pulse irregular. This wasn't merely a reaction to the gunshot wound, it was something more unusual. The irregular pulse and breathing difficulty didn't align with the expected symptoms of a gunshot wound to the head. This led Leal to note down his observations meticulously, a record that would later be scrutinized by medical historians. Fast forward to the 21st century, where historians and medical experts began to analyze Leal's notes. They started to form a theory that Lincoln might have been suffering from a rare medical condition unbeknownst to him and his contemporaries. The irregular pulse and difficulty in breathing suggested by Leal's notes pointed towards a condition called Marfan syndrome, a genetic disorder that affects the body's connective tissue. This condition could explain Lincoln's tall stature, thin build, and the cardiovascular symptoms noted by Dr. Leal. It's a theory that has sparked debate among medical historians and Lincoln scholars alike. However, without genetic testing, which is impossible with the current preservation of Lincoln's DNA, this theory remains just that, a theory. Yet it's a fascinating lens through which to view Lincoln, a man already shrouded in mystery and intrigue. It adds another layer to the complexity of his persona and his presidency. It also underscores the fact that even in his final moments, Lincoln continued to be a figure of fascination, his life and death etching an indelible mark on American history. This observation adds another layer of intrigue to an already complex story. Booth's act of terror didn't end with Lincoln's assassination. In the aftermath of the heinous act, Booth found himself on the run, pursued by authorities who were determined to bring him to justice. Following the assassination, Booth managed to escape Washington, D.C., and embarked on a perilous journey that would last 12 harrowing days. Using his knowledge of the local terrain, he evaded capture, slipping through the fingers of the law enforcement time and again. But as the days wore on, the net began to tighten around him. News of Lincoln's assassination had sparked outrage across the nation, and the manhunt for Booth became one of the most intense in American history. Every possible resource was deployed to bring him to justice, and slowly but surely, the authorities began to close in on him. Finally, on April 26th, Booth was tracked down to a farm in Virginia. Surrounded by Union soldiers, he found himself cornered with nowhere to run. It was in a barn on this farm where Booth's reign of terror was brought to an abrupt end. Refusing to surrender, Booth was shot by a Union soldier, thus concluding one of the most infamous chapters in American history. In the end, justice, albeit delayed, was served. Booth's capture and death marked the end of a manhunt that had gripped a nation and brought a sense of closure to a country that had been rocked by the assassination of its leader. But the echoes of Booth's actions would reverberate through history, leaving a legacy of questions and speculations that continue to fascinate us to this day.